Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I grew up in this sprawling neighborhood where kids actually played outside together. Our group was massive, sometimes pushing past 10 people on any given day. We had all types mixed in there. The kids who spent lunch period talking about comic books, the ones who practiced football plays in someone's yard, kids who were a little heavier, kids who looked like strong wind might blow them away, boys and girls ranging from 8 to 14. The only thing that mattered was being decent and wanting to have a good time. Everything ran smooth until this new kid moved in 3 houses down. The whole crew rode over on our bikes to do what we always did, welcome the new neighbor and let them know they could hang with us whenever. He seemed excited and tagged along with us that same afternoon. That first day felt slightly off, but nothing alarming. Just new kid awkwardness, we figured. Over the next week, though, his true colors started bleeding through. This kid was spoiled rotten and had a mean streak a mile wide. Lose a game of tag, he'd scream bloody murder and start pointing fingers at whoever was closest. Somebody got him out in dodgeball. He'd shove them and start throwing insults around. Half the time, he'd just burst into tears over absolutely nothing. He'd storm off to his house at least every other day, completely furious about something stupid. The pattern was always the same. He'd start out fine, then out of nowhere, he'd escalate to complete psycho mode. Our little paradise turned into constant damage control. We spent more time breaking up fights and talking him down than actually having fun. His mom was even worse. She'd walk over after he went home crying and tear into us about things that never even happened. That kid had her completely fooled. She bought every lie he sold her, and between the two of them, they'd created an absolute monster. This nightmare dragged on for about a week before his best friend came to stay at his house for a few nights. Together they were like the final boss in a video game, except twice as annoying and not nearly as fun. We set up a game of Foursquare in someone's driveway, and the new kid got eliminated fair and square. He immediately started screaming at the girl keeping score that he wasn't out, then shoved her straight down into the dirt. One of our friends ran over to help her up, and the visiting kid shoved him down too. Then this little demon threw a handful of dirt on the girl while calling her a stupid witch. I'd had enough. I told both of them to leave and that they weren't welcome to play with us anymore. They just laughed at me. The new kid said we'd see him tomorrow for a kickball like nothing happened. We all knew he'd show up the next day like he always did, so we called an emergency meeting in our friend's treehouse. That's where we handled serious business. Up in that treehouse, we'd talk through problems until everyone agreed on a solution. But this was different. This was beyond anything we'd dealt with before. We knew we had to get rid of them permanently. The next afternoon, me and my friend were shooting hoops at his house. Right on schedule, both kids came walking up and asked why we weren't at the park playing kickball. We told them everyone else would show up soon, but we just got in Mortal Kombat so we could play that while we waited. Once we got upstairs, I grabbed the new kid and yanked him into the bedroom on the right while my friend grabbed the visitor and pulled him into the bedroom on the left. In each room, the rest of our group was waiting, split up evenly. The second they crossed the threshold, everyone grabbed an arm or leg and forced them into chairs where we tied them up tight. We pulled the phones out of both rooms and popped Barney tapes into the TV and VCR combos. These VCRs had auto rewind, so once the tape ended, it would automatically start over from the beginning. That was the real torture. We knew the ropes wouldn't hold them forever, so we tied their doorknobs together with every jump rope we could find in the house. They sat in those chairs for probably an hour, which meant they watched that purple dinosaur sing and dance through the same episode about 3 times before they managed to wiggle free. Watching them try to escape was honestly hilarious. The jump ropes had just enough give that they could crack the door open maybe an inch at most. One of them would pull their door open and it would yank the other door shut. They literally fought against each other for a solid 5 minutes before they figured out what was happening. When we thought they'd learned their lesson, we told them through the door that if they promised to never come back, we'd let them out. The new kid yelled back that he'd do whatever he wanted and demanded we let him out right now. Alright then, buddy. Here's the thing, my friend's parents were both at work and wouldn't be home for many more hours, so we kept them locked up for many more hours. The whole group went downstairs and watched multiple movies, made sandwiches for lunch, played video games, and even went outside to ride bikes for a bit. Eventually, though, it was getting close to when parents would start coming home from work, so we knew we had to release them. We hadn't really thought through this part. We didn't know what they'd do when we opened those doors. So we did what any nervous kids would do and grabbed random objects to defend ourselves with in case they tried to attack us. We had a baseball bat, a hockey stick, and someone was holding a tennis racket for some reason. We told them through the door that we were letting them out and to back away. We untied the jump ropes and opened both doors at the same time. They looked completely broken, defeated. Part of me actually felt bad seeing them like that. We told them they could leave, and they just walked out without saying a single word. After they left, panic set in hard. We were convinced his mom would storm over and tell all our parents what we'd done. We'd be grounded for the rest of the summer, maybe longer. We spent the whole evening jumping at every sound outside, certain that angry parents were coming. But nobody came. Not that night, not the next day, not ever. And those two kids never bothered us again. Never saw them at the park, never saw them riding around the neighborhood. They just stayed away completely. Our group went back to normal, back to how things were before they showed up. No more fights to break up, no more situations to diffuse, no more dealing with tantrums over losing at kickball. I thought my divorce was behind me. We'd agreed to split custody 50-50, and I even gave my ex decision-making authority over the kids. I figured he'd be a better father than he was a husband. For about a year, things were okay. We managed to co-parent without too much drama. Then I started dating Tom. He was great with my kids, always patient and kind. They actually liked having him around, which meant everything to me. When the school's fall festival came up, Tom offered to come along. The kids were excited. I didn't think it would be a big deal. The morning after I mentioned Tom would be at the festival, my phone lit up with messages from my ex. He was furious that I was bringing Tom to the kids' school event. I said Tom had been helping out a lot and the kids wanted him there. He said he didn't care what the kids wanted and that it was inappropriate. I said he was being ridiculous. He said we'd see about that. The next day he called to tell me he wouldn't be watching the kids while I worked anymore. This was a huge problem since my job required me to be there at 6 in the morning, before the kids even needed to be at school. I had no backup plan. I said he couldn't just suddenly bail on this since we'd agreed he'd help. He said he could do whatever he wanted, and I needed to figure it out myself. I suggested my mom could watch them. He refused, saying he had to meet any caregiver first and approve them. I pointed out he'd known my mother for 10 years. He said it didn't matter and he needed to meet with her first to make sure she was suitable. I asked when. He said he'd let me know. He never did. Every time I tried to set something up, he had an excuse. Meanwhile, I was losing shifts at work. I finally found a daycare near the school, but it cost twice what I was budgeting for. I missed 2 full days scrambling to get everything sorted out. Then the phone calls started. Every single night he wanted the kids to call him. That part was fine, but the timing became a weapon. One evening we were eating dinner when my phone rang. I texted him back saying we'd call in 30 minutes when we were done eating. He immediately responded demanding they call him right then because he had a right to talk to his children. I said we were in the middle of dinner. He said he didn't care and threatened to call his lawyer if I didn't put them on the phone. This became the pattern. If we were at the park, at the store, doing homework, it didn't matter. If I didn't drop everything immediately, he threatened legal action. Then came the location tracking. He started texting me throughout the day asking where we were, what we were doing, who we were with. One morning I had to go into work at 4:30 to clean up some storm damage. I left the kids with Tom since dragging them out of bed that early seemed cruel. They were safe, they were sleeping, and they'd be up in time for school. My ex found out somehow. He sent me angry messages saying I'd left his children with that man. I explained they were asleep and I was only gone 3 hours. He said that was it and he was taking me back to court because I was violating our agreement. I said I wasn't violating anything. He said we'd let a judge decide and asked if I had money for a lawyer. He threatened to file for child support even though we split custody equally. He raged about everything. When the kids had a Christmas play at school, he refused to bring them because he knew Tom would be there. My kids missed performing in front of their friends because of his ego. Medical appointments became battles. Our daughter needed to see a specialist for her allergies. I made the appointment and told him when it was. He said he didn't agree to the appointment. I explained she needed to see someone because she'd been having reactions. He said to cancel it or he wasn't paying his half. I said he was putting our daughter's health at risk over nothing. He said it was his money and his decision, then said to sue him if I didn't like it. He started refusing to let me have the kids during his custody time for anything. Birthday parties, sleepovers with family, none of it. Things we'd been flexible about before suddenly became impossible. This went on for 2 months. Every day brought a new threat, a new demand, a new way to make my life difficult. I realized the court threats were empty. He didn't have money for a lawyer. He just wanted me scared and compliant. So I decided to make sure he'd never be able to afford one. He was on food stamps. I knew he was claiming to pay his first ex-wife rent for the house they'd owned together, even though she still owned half of it. That rental payment claim was probably how he qualified for benefits. I sent her a message asking if this might seem random, but was she getting rent payments from him? She said no and asked why. I said I just needed to confirm something and thanked her. I sent screenshots of our conversation to the social services office along with a fraud report. Within a week, his benefits were cut off and he was being sued for the money he'd fraudulently received. His ex-wife saw those same screenshots and realized he'd been lying about paying her for years. She filed a lawsuit for her share of the house value. Then I filed to modify our custody agreement. I had everything documented. Every nasty text message. Every threat. Screenshots of him saying to the kids I was a bad mother. Medical records showing I paid for every doctor visit, every prescription, every urgent care trip for the past year. Photos of the kids looking filthy when I picked them up from his place. Receipts for every single thing I'd bought them. His own lawyer had sent me a letter months ago saying he was looking for additional work since I wasn't paying him anything, which proved he was capable of earning more income if he tried for child support. When he got served with my petition, he called me screaming. He asked if I was really doing this. I said he'd been threatening it for months, and I figured I'd save him the trouble. He said I couldn't afford this. I said neither could he, especially now. 2 weeks later, his lawyer contacted mine. He agreed to modify the custody agreement. He lost his decision-making authority. He can't demand approval of caregivers. He can't refuse medical care. He can't harass me about my schedule or who I'm dating. He's still paying off his first ex-wife. His threat stopped completely. When I drop the kids off now, he barely says 2 words to me. I've known this guy for a while now, and he's always been insufferable. Got his doctorate in physics about 6 months back from one of the best schools in the country, which just made everything worse. Don't get me wrong, he's brilliant when it comes to his field. Problem is, he thinks that brilliance extends to literally everything else in life. Case in point, my wife and I decided to put our kids in Montessori schools. We did our research, we're happy with the decision, end of story. When he found out, I got a 30-minute lecture about how we're wasting money and the whole concept is garbage. I even told him I translated actual studies on the subject professionally, pointed out successful people who went through Montessori education. Didn't matter. He just couldn't accept that maybe he didn't know everything about early childhood education. He does this with everything. When my wife mentioned she was taking vitamin supplements, he launched into a speech about how most vitamins are useless and we're just creating expensive urine. When I bought a new car, he spent an hour explaining why my choice was objectively wrong based on fuel efficiency calculations he'd done in his head. We've joked before that he might be on the spectrum, but he's been evaluated multiple times. He's not. He's just socially clueless and stubborn as hell. Because of all this, I try to keep my distance. But last week, that wasn't an option. A good friend of mine was visiting from overseas, someone I've known since we were kids. He was throwing a barbecue, and since we go way back, my wife and I brought the whole family. It was supposed to be a nice afternoon catching up, good food, letting the kids play together. The barbecue started around 2 p.m., and for the first hour or so, everything was perfect. My kids were playing with the other children there, my wife was catching up with some old friends, and I was finally getting quality time with my buddy, who I hadn't seen in over 2 years. Then I noticed him zeroing in on my kids. He was standing near the food table watching them eat. Everything was going fine until my oldest daughter came up to me, looking miserable around 3:30 p.m. She's under 10 and I could tell something was really bothering her. I asked her what was wrong and if she wasn't feeling well. She told me she wanted to go home. When I pressed her on why, she explained that the guy had spent 15 minutes telling her she shouldn't eat hot dogs. He'd given her a detailed explanation of all the stuff that goes into them and how they're made. He'd apparently described the entire process, from the meat scraps to the preservatives, in graphic detail. Now my daughter isn't sheltered. She knows meat comes from animals, she's fine with that. But when a kid is enjoying a hot dog at a barbecue, they don't need a detailed breakdown of the industrial meat processing industry. I calmed her down, told her to ignore him, and go play with her siblings and the other kids. She bounced back pretty quickly, the way kids do. I didn't want to make a scene at my friend's event, so I let it slide. Big mistake. I went back to my conversation, keeping half an eye on where he was. About 30 minutes later, I heard her scream. Not just upset, actually screaming. I ran over and found her crying, her hot dog on the ground in the dirt. He'd walked up and knocked it right out of her hand, telling her she shouldn't be eating that garbage. My other kids had stopped playing and were staring at the scene. My youngest started crying too, just from seeing her sister upset. I handed her off to my wife and pulled him aside immediately. I told him in no uncertain terms that he doesn't talk to my kids without asking me first. He doesn't teach my kids anything without permission, and he absolutely does not touch my kids ever. I made sure he understood I was being clear about this. He doesn't have children himself, so I figured maybe he just didn't understand boundaries. I was willing to chalk it up to ignorance. Another mistake. Instead of apologizing or even just walking away, he doubled down. He started going on about how my daughter shouldn't be eating hot dogs because they're completely unhealthy. He pulled out his phone and tried to show me some study he'd read. I cut him off and told him I didn't care what he thought. I told him to stay away from my family for the rest of the day. He looked offended, like I was the one being unreasonable. He muttered something about people not appreciating when someone tries to help them. I kept an eye on him after that and he kept his distance, but I noticed him watching us, like he was documenting something. My friend enjoyed his party, we ate good food. I thought that was it. A few days later, on one morning around 9 a.m., someone from Child Protective Services showed up at our door. Someone had filed a report claiming we were neglecting our kids, specifically my oldest. The officer was professional but thorough. She asked to walk through the house, which we obviously allowed. She checked the bedrooms, looked in the fridge, examined the bathrooms. She asked about our kids' school, their doctor visits, their daily routines. The officer came in, looked around, talked to my daughter for a few minutes, and quickly determined everything was fine. She even commented that our daughter seemed well adjusted and happy. Sure, the house wasn't spotless, but show me a house with kids that is. Before she left, she told us that the report had been anonymous but extremely detailed. Whoever filed it had included specific claims about our daughter being emotionally distressed and being fed an unhealthy diet. After she left, I immediately called a lawyer friend of mine. He said it looked like we were in the clear, but I should stay in touch just in case. He also warned me that false reports could sometimes lead to multiple visits if the person filing kept calling. Then I started making calls, asking around. It didn't take long to figure out what happened. Turned out our physics genius had been offended by how I treated him at the barbecue. So offended, in fact, that he'd filed a false anonymous report with Protective Services. And because he's incapable of thinking he might ever be wrong, he'd been telling people about it like he deserved praise. He'd been saying he had a moral obligation to report child neglect when he saw it. One mutual friend told me he'd gone on for 20 minutes about how hot dogs were slowly poisoning children. I needed to be absolutely sure before I did anything, so I went to his place with my phone recording in my pocket. This was Thursday afternoon around 4 p.m. I confronted him directly and asked if he'd called protective services on my family. He admitted he had, saying someone needed to do something about how I was treating my daughter. He complained about me feeding her garbage and called it completely irresponsible. He said he'd documented the entire incident at the barbecue. Then he said he'd do it again if he had to. He even suggested he might file another report if he heard I was still feeding my kids processed meats. I wanted to destroy him right there. Instead, I kept my voice level and told him that if he came near me or anyone in my family again, I get a restraining order. I also made it clear I'd make sure everyone we know understood exactly why. He scoffed at that, said he wasn't worried about what people thought. I went back to my car and listened to the recording. His admission came through crystal clear. I sent it straight to my lawyer, who said he'd work with some contacts at the prosecutor's office to see if we could get him charged for filing a false report. He explained that false reports to child services carry serious penalties, potentially fines up to $5,000 and even jail time. Still waiting on that. But I wasn't done. After he got his doctorate, he'd been bragging about moving into a new flat. He bought the new place for around $300,000. He'd renovated his current place extensively to help sell it, installed lots of expensive new features that required significant electrical work. He'd put in new lighting throughout, upgraded the kitchen with under-cabinet LEDs, installed a whole smart home system. Same thing with his new flat. He'd spent at least $20,000 on renovations between both places. He did most of the electrical work himself. Unless you're licensed, that's completely illegal. Our building codes are strict about this for safety reasons. I called in an inspector for both properties. I told them I had concerns about unpermitted electrical work. They asked to see certification for who did the electrical work. Obviously, there wasn't any. The inspector I spoke to later told me he'd tried to explain that his physics doctorate didn't qualify him to do electrical work. He'd apparently argued for 15 minutes about how he understood electrical systems better than most electricians. Knowing him, he probably argued with the inspector that his work was fine and he didn't need to pay anyone. Haven't seen or heard from him directly since then, but word gets around. He had to hire a certified electrician to inspect every single modification he made in both flats. Everything had to be dismantled and examined. The electrician found several code violations, including some wiring that was actually dangerous. The inspection and repairs cost him around $15,000. The people buying his old flat weren't happy about the delay. They'd been scheduled to move in within 2 weeks. When they found out why there was a delay, they walked away from the purchase and filed a lawsuit. They're suing him for around $20,000 for breach of contract and the costs they incurred finding another place. Now he's stuck paying mortgages on 2 flats he can't sell. His monthly payments total around $4,000. He's had to move back in with his parents because he can't afford both places. The new flat he was so excited about is sitting empty. He's trying to sell his old flat again, but now he has to disclose the electrical issues and the lawsuit. That's going to tank the value significantly. I don't know if there was a fine levied against him by the city for the unpermitted work, but I really hope so. I also heard the prosecutor's office is considering charges for the false report. My lawyer says it's looking promising. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.